At Kroger, we believe it takes the right team to bring you the freshest produce. That's why we partner with farmers who grow only the best. And that level of teamwork means better, fresher options time and time again. Working with farmers is what it takes to be fresh for everyone. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Get more ways to save at the Buy 5 or More Save $1 each sale. Just buy 5 or more participating items and save $1 each with card. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Underdog Fantasy is the fastest-growing fantasy app and easiest place to play fantasy sports. Just jump on UnderdogFantasy.com or download the app, draft your team, and that's it. And if drafts aren't your thing, they also have a pick'em game where you can win 20 times your money in a single night. Use promo code RADIO, and Underdog will double your first deposit when you sign up with up to $100 in bonus cash. Deposit $100, get $100 free. That's promo code RADIO. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
If anybody ever wants to know what it means to be a spot bettor, yesterday was that spot. We talked at great length, 12, 13 minutes, I think, on yesterday's show about how Boston's Game 7, actually they're both accurate, Game 7 win over Milwaukee had changed the betting market for Game 1 against Miami in a way that sort of, it almost snowballed in value. Meaning, just to recap what we talked about on yesterday's podcast, and we try to break these games down every day. We break the games down, we look at pace, all that stuff, and a lot of times I say, well, a little bit this, a little bit that. And then every once in a while you get to a day where you're like, okay, no one remembers that Game 7s take a lot out of a team. They have no time to prepare. They have to just roll in there and try their best. And that was what we talked about in yesterday's podcast, which was the Heat at -2 was a crazy value, given the rest advantage. And the fact that the under was still getting bet, even as the number was rolling downward, was also a great value. I talked about how, the pace, inability to play the same level of defense when a team has tired legs, and Boston relies on that stuff. And we talked about a bunch with Miami wanting to actually play faster than they'd been kind of forced to. More possessions in their home games against Philadelphia. They were trying to slow down Atlanta. They were attempting to be the slower team. They're back to trying to be the faster team here. And it all panned out. The third quarter, Boston had nothing left in the tank. Halftime, they didn't come back with any energy at all. And that was that moment. So you get to these spot bets, and we talked about series price also on yesterday's pod. In terms of, look, the Heat were the underdog despite having home court advantage in this series, and now the Heat are at -140. So they went from being an underdog to being a favorite. Boston now went from being the favorite to being an underdog. So go ahead and grab both of those at an underdog price, and bammo, series price, you've locked in a win. Heat Celtics. All you needed was for Miami to win that first game, and your series bet, our series hedge target, has already worked out. And the Heat covered pretty easily. It went way over the mark. 225, soared over the mark. And that's going to set up a little bit of a bubble for the next game in this series tomorrow, which we'll talk about on tomorrow's podcast. As far as today goes, it's Mavs and Warriors. We're going to get into that right after this brief hello. Hello. See what I did there? This is Fantasy NBA Today. I'm Dan Vespris. Sports Ethos, our benevolent overlords. I haven't referred to anybody as a benevolent overlord in a while. That was really, I like to call hoop ball that, but it's still the same. Still the same overlords over here. SportsEthos.com at EthosFantasyBK. I hope some of you guys have been going and following Ethos Fantasy BB and Ethos Fantasy FB. I don't know how many of it is. Handful per day. That's all I want. Go find those two Twitter accounts and follow them. Ethos Fantasy BB for baseball, and Ethos Fantasy FB for football. You'll see the podcast coming out. Football's actually going to have a ton of content coming in the next month or two, coming down the pike with that one. Very exciting times here at Sports Ethos as we expand beyond basketball. Come on, that's probably the most exciting thing we've done here at Sports Ethos /Hoopball since we started. We were good at basketball from day one because Aaron Brewski was running the joint, and then to now, I mean, this is very exciting stuff. So please do check those out. Go follow them. I'm telling you, I'm begging you. Do it. I'm trying my hand at baseball. I'm still terrible at it. It doesn't matter. Give me all the help in the world. it's too much. Can't keep up with it. Not at the end of a basketball season. I'm just too gassed at that point. But that's because I'm in, 13, 14 basketball leagues and running a podcast, and this is everything I do. I need to get a life. Anywho, Warriors, 5.5-point favorites at home, total of 214.5 against Dallas. Money's coming in relatively split on the total at 214.5. Warriors getting a little bit more of the cash on the side, but it's staying steady. That's that number's pretty locked in. So this one you could consider playing in kind of a similar way to what we looked about with Miami and Boston yesterday. The problem, of course, is that Dallas did have an extra day to recover, and that's a big deal. They're still going to be a bit winded, and there's probably a little edge on the Warriors side because of that, but Dallas had an extra day to prep, they had an extra day to rest, and their Game 7 against Phoenix was a laugher. I know Boston's Game 7 was a little bit of a laugher also, but to have to bounce right back, and yeah, Boston pulled away in that game. They were just better right from the outset, but their guys played starters minutes in Game 7, despite getting eliminated. Phoenix didn't even really need to give their guys starters minutes because Paul played 31 minutes in the last game of his year. Luka, 30. That game was a blowout after one quarter. So there's a little bit of a different feel. And again, we talk about spot betting. This doesn't have the same impact as the Celtics-Bucks Game 7 did, as the quick turnaround did for the game yesterday. That was sort of our put the money in the ATM moment, or get it out, or whatever. I don't know what the metaphor ought to be. That said, the team that is a little bit more fresh, which the Warriors would be for this one, they're probably going to be the team to dictate the pace. You have to be mentally and physically at full strength to dictate the pace in a playoff game, and it helps to be at home. Warriors have that. Although, again, as I talked about yesterday, I thought they'd probably be spending most of their time prepping for Phoenix. Regardless, they're going to run their stuff, and Dallas isn't going to have that much time to prepare for it. You saw the Mavs. They just got better. The longer the series went, they got better and better and better. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see that type of thing happen again. So just like with Celtics and Heat, I would actually push ever so slightly towards the over in this game. I know the Mavericks want to slow it down. Warriors want to open it up. The Dubs will have a little bit more success in controlling the pace. As far as the side goes, 5.5 is a pretty good size number. I don't know. I mean, Luka could come out and go buck wild because they got the 2 days off. They had the easy Game 7. I think I'd probably rather look at the total than the side in this one, but if I had to, again, I would fade the team that went 7 games. I'm not going to. This isn't like yesterday's where I liked the Heat, especially with the number coming down. There's a lot of love going Dallas's way. This is a lower number that on the side, at least, than we would have had this line come out a week ago, before everybody saw the Mavs win those last couple games. Flip the script. These teams that came from behind to win their 7-game series in the last round, they are getting a boost. But the difference on this side, Warriors are already a public team. So the Mavericks getting a boost probably just kind of levels that off. Whereas on the other side, the Celtics are actually more of a public team than the Heat. Celtics getting an extra boost actually tipped the scales even farther in the direction of the Heat being a value. I liked yesterday's stuff a lot more than I like today's. Lean to the over. Beady lean to the Warriors on the side. Almost nothing over there on the side in this ballgame. And then we'll talk about tomorrow. We'll get into the pace stuff a little bit because that total has come up for Celtics Heat. Line has come up for Celtics Heat. And we might now be able to bet into an overreaction to Game 1. It's a glorious thing. It's a glorious thing. Overreactions. That is where so much betting money can be acquired. We do it during the regular season with our motivational angles. And we do it now in the playoffs because everybody's watching a couple of ball games. So it's all the room to overreact. We didn't see a ton of overreacting actually in the last round, which we only had, what am I trying to think of? I think there's like a Dallas-Phoenix total bubble that we got to bet into one time. That was a more obvious one, but the rest of them were like, it's probably within 4 or 5 points of number of possessions in the ball game. So then you're just flipping a coin as to who's going to have a good shooting night. No thanks. No thanks. Series price remains the same here. Warriors Mavs, since they haven't played a game yet. Dubs minus 200, Mavs plus 170. Again, actually that's come down a tiny bit. Dubs at minus 200 is not insane here before game 1. I think they're going to win this ball game. And then you'd be able to get a pretty good price on Dallas after that. If Dallas loses game 1, that probably moves $40-$50. You might be able to get yourself a middle set up there. If Dallas loses the first 2, then you definitely get yourself a middle. It's not as easy to play as the other one. Boston-Miami was like, sometimes there's just something gets telegraphed, and you can walk right through it. Okay, so starting today, over on the Ethos Fantasy BK side, the Fantasy Pass, they're dropping the first team review, which is the Houston Rockets. That drops today at some point, I think maybe a little bit later on today. So we're going to try to run in conjunction with them a little bit here on the podcast. It won't be a perfect match because they're running on weekends, but we've actually already done the Atlantic Division. So if they get ahead of us, we'll catch up on those days when we'll talk about something else, or we'll talk about a different team. But let's start our journey. This is 5 weeks left because we did 5 teams already. 5 weeks left. We're going to go through each team. That'll get us pretty damn close to free agency, actually, by the time that's done. I do still want to do a Yahoo season in review, but I'm going to need 10 minutes of a podcast just to rant about what a sleazy move it is that Yahoo changed their pre-ranks this year after the season started. Ugh. I don't know when they did it, but I noticed it in late March. So at some point between opening night and late March, which is a very large window, but I know it wasn't right before the season started because, seeing DeMar DeRozan in the teens, yeah, everybody knows they didn't have him in the teens in their pre-rank. His ADP was in the 40s and 50s, sometimes later than that. He was getting drafted. Pre-rank in the teens? No. Come on, Yahoo. Stop it. Hey, folks, Dan here. And a reminder, if you look for it, every day is a cause for celebration. You can celebrate a friend for their promotion, their wedding, they had a baby, or some, life thing. You can celebrate yourself for getting your back to finally crack. It's no easy feat, especially if you got an old back. Or maybe you just want to celebrate living in the year 2022 where you can get beer, wine, and spirits delivered from Drizzly in under 60 minutes without leaving your couch. Right now, Drizzly is giving all new customers $5 off their first order with code FAST5. So download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com and use the promo code FAST5 for $5 off your first order. It's the #1 app for alcohol delivery. $5 off your first order. FAST5, the promo code FAST5 at checkout. Go to drizzly.com or download the app today. Enjoy the convenience of beer, wine, and spirits straight to your door in under 60 minutes.
Underdog Fantasy is the fastest-growing fantasy app and easiest place to play fantasy sports. Just jump on UnderdogFantasy.com or download the app, draft your team, and that's it. And if drafts aren't your thing, they also have a pick'em game where you can win 20 times your money in a single night. Use promo code RADIO, and Underdog will double your first deposit when you sign up with up to $100 in bonus cash. Deposit $100, get $100 free. That's promo code RADIO. Terms and conditions apply.
So we'll start with the worst team in the NBA and go from there. And that team was, by the way, the draft lottery happened yesterday. We don't really care much about that on this podcast, but it did happen. Congratulations to the Orlando Magic, who we will talk about very shortly here, since they were also one of the worst teams. Rockets, I believe, got 3rd pick in the draft lotto. Seeing a lot of Kings at 4 stuff on my timeline. I happen to follow a lot of Kings people because, Brewski covered them for a while, so then kind of got piped in with that group. And honestly, I've already forgotten who picked second. I don't care. This stuff, we'll worry about that when we get there. I know that that's listener fodder, and more people would probably check out the podcast if I did a show on like who might go top 3, but I'm not gonna. I don't have to. It's my damn show. I'll do what I want. Rockets, team in review. Number of players coming off the books for Houston. Not a ton of them were impact guys, but a lot of things do go to 0. First of all, DJ Augustine is currently apparently on contract for a veteran's minimum for next year, even though he wasn't even on the Rockets at the end of the season. Dennis Schroeder is someone who is off the books and someone who was playing towards the end of the year. That was obviously post-trade deadline. Daniel House was a Rocket for large portions of this year. He got moved. Sekou Doumbouya, another guy that got cut, and his Canner, I don't even know what the hell he's up to these days. Bruno Fernando, I think, actually was playing for the Rockets at the end of the season. He's off the books as well. Overall, the payroll is quite John Wall-centric. John set to make $47 million. Eric Gordon, who effectively now hits a contract year. He has a team option for $21 million for the following season, but there's no way anybody on God's green earth has given that dude $21 million with as many games as he missed, and really as the skills have deteriorated a bit. He's set to make $19.5 million this year, and he will be traded this season. Eric Gordon will, so just bank on that. Christian Wood is also in a contract year. He's making about $14 million. Jaylen Green, second year of his rookie contract. They got him for a while. David Nwaba has a year or 2, depending on a team option. And then you got a bunch of other young guys alongside Jalen Green. Alperen Şengün, Usman Garuba, Josh Christopher. Garrison Matthews is still on a very cheap contract. Oh, they got him over from Washington. KPJ next year, and then a qualifying offer the year after that, so he becomes a restricted free agent. KJ Martin has a couple seasons left. Jayshawn Tate, team option that I'm sure will be exercised for only $1.8 million for this coming year. So, what do we make of Houston? Well, if you look at this past season, things were not great. Christian Wood was the only Rocket inside the top 100. He was at 80. He was actually the only Rocket inside the top 160 on a per-game basis. Jayshawn Tate was at 161, which I know means that numerically I'm splitting hairs a little bit there. Kevin Porter Jr. at 170. He was actually in the 250 range. He finished the season with about 3 weeks where he was very, very good because everybody else was sitting out ball games. Christian Wood was sitting out games there. Dennis Schroeder missed a few. I think Jalen Green was playing at that point. Şengün was playing, but Eric Gordon was resting. So they did finally, in the last 2.5 weeks of the year, they did turn it over to the young guys. You could not pay me enough to draft Christian Wood next year. He's also going to be on the block. I don't care who the Rockets get at 3. I'm sure they're going to get a very good rookie, but they're not going to be a good team yet. They will probably still be tanking next year. You can usually get a feel for teams that are ready to come out of the tank based on other things that they're doing. But look, the Rockets won 20 games this year. 20 and 62. That is exceptionally bad. That is exceptionally bad. They were 1 win away from not clearing the teens in an 82-game season. Yikes. There are maybe 3 players in the NBA you could put on that team right now that would make them feel like they were competing for a play-in tournament spot. The last play-in spot went to the Spurs, who had 34 wins. There aren't many guys in the NBA you could put on the Rockets that would improve them by 15 wins, which is what they would have needed to get past the Spurs this year. 15 wins? So, if you had a good rookie to this team, let's say that they get the best rookie in the draft, what does that even... I mean, honestly, a lot of times rookies make teams worse, but let's say, just for argument's sake, that he does whoever ends up on Houston does make them a tiny bit better. Let's just say for argument's sake. What, 3 games? 4? 5? 6? That's a lot, by the way. 6 is a lot. Even if you did that, you're still talking one of the 5 worst teams in the NBA. Sorry, Rockets fans. I'm just trying to be a pragmatist here. If they let John Wall play and brought in a good rookie, you're still probably talking about less than 10 wins. Probably way less. Probably more like 5 or 6. But I've been trying to exaggerate the number of extra wins just to say, well, could we, in any insane universe, actually push them somewhere near the play-in tournament? And the answer is no. This team is another tank year away from trying to compete. And by all accounts, they are about exactly 1 tank year away from trying to compete because so much money comes off the book after this coming season. By all accounts, and let's assume here, which I think we can do so pretty safely, that Eric Gordon is not going to have his team option picked up by anyone, no matter where he goes, for $21 million. So just assume that contract is done. He's an expiring contract. John Wall is an expiring contract. He's going to exercise his player option if he hasn't already. I don't think he has. Christian Wood is an expiring contract. Those 3 players, and Wood, by the way, is actually a pretty damn good value when you sort of stack them up against the other guys that I just mentioned. Gordon, nearly $20 million. Wood, 14. That's 34 mil. And John Wall, 47. $71 million of the Rockets' payroll evaporates after next season. You want to know how much they have on contract for next season right now? And that'll add, because whoever they take in the first round is going to be getting like a $7 or $8 million rookie contract. So, fine, pull $8 mil off of that number and say $63 million comes off the books. They're going to be sitting on a $49 million payroll if those 3 guys came off the books. Do you know how many players are on the books for the year after that? 2. KJ Martin and Garrison Matthews are the only players on the Rockets who have guaranteed deals for 2 seasons from now. Now, of course, they will pick up Jalen Green's series of team options and then probably extend him. Same deal for Alperen Şengün. Those guys will very obviously still be on the team 2 seasons from now. But the 2023-2024 season, if you put Jalen Green on the books and you put Alperen Şengün on the books, which is between those 2 guys about $13 million, they would have about $17 million on their payroll 2 years from now. Let's say they put KPJ on there, that's $22 mil. Restricted free agency, or maybe they sign him for a little more than that. Either way, 2023, not this coming season, but the following one, the Rockets are going to be in the market to bring in a bunch of free agents if they want to. I would say they probably do. And I would say that it's somewhere in that front office, they've got a calendar year circled. Say, look, this is when it's all coming off. They're going to be trying to trade John Wall for other expiring contracts and picks, which is why I don't rule anything out with the Lakers. They're going to be moving Eric Gordon. Unquestionably, he'll be getting traded for picks of some kind at some point this year. I think Christian Wood probably gets moved also. That one's less set in stone, although you could probably get the best haul for him because his contract is the most reasonable, easiest to move among them, and of those 3 guys, probably the most impactful for a team that, wants a big guy to go run and can actually move his feet a little bit because he's still young. I don't think all 3 of those guys get traded. It's just too hard to trade everybody. Orlando kind of pulled it off, but it's really hard to just trade everyone. But I'd say there's a pretty damn good probability that 2 guys get traded, and I would bet most of my savings that one of those 3 guys does get moved next year. Which one? I don't know. Eric Gordon, probably, maybe he's the most likely to get moved, and you don't have to wait necessarily for the trade deadline on that one. The other guys, maybe they just wait around. John Wall's probably going to get told to sit again next year, unless he gets traded in the offseason, which I guess could happen. And then maybe you'd consider drafting him, but I wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't now. So what does that mean for who's left over? Well, I'm not drafting Christian Wood, even though he was the only Rocket inside the top 100. I'm not drafting Eric Gordon. I'm not drafting John Wall, which doesn't leave that many Rockets left. What I would suggest doing, though, is looking at the last 20 games of the year for Houston, because it was a little bit of a different cross-section. KPJ was a top 60 player over that stretch when everybody else got rested. His percentages were still not good at 44 and 76%, but they were not kill-your-team brutal. Kevin Porter Jr., who I have loathed to compliment on this podcast and told you guys 150 times leading up to last year, basically every show of the offseason, I said, don't put Kevin Porter Jr. on your fantasy team. I don't have that same stance for next year. I actually think he's someone you might want to think about targeting for when all of these guys get moved. Now, there's a little bit of a stash element there. Can he keep up any of that good stuff at the beginning of next season if Christian Wood is allowed to play, if Eric Gordon is allowed to play? I don't think John Wall is touching the court, so we don't have to worry about that. No, probably not. But if there is this magical universe where suddenly he's now more in the 44 and 76% range, he's a late-round flyer, because no one is going to want to touch him after the last couple of years. I think people will finally kind of catch on that he's a massive downside guy. But if you can get him at like 115, 120 and say, well, look at all the things that could happen here. On the head-to-head side, he actually makes a ton of sense. A ton. Because then he sort of plays into proper form as your season goes on. Jalen Green's an obvious choice. He was very good down the stretch. He was number 87 over the last 20 games. He was number 62 over the last 10 games of the year. Want to see that free throw percent get better. He's getting to the line. He's hitting a ton of three-pointers. But again, they need Christian Wood to not really be playing. But Jaylen Green's someone you can definitely draft. I don't know what the upside is there necessarily. I mean, he was taking close to 20 shots a game over that stretch and still sitting in the 60 range, mostly because the free throws. I mean, really, that's it. He's not going to get many steals. It's a lot of scoring in threes, a couple of rebounds, couple of assists. We need free throw percent to get into the low 80s at least. And then you're talking about someone that you can reliably peg as a top 75 play. And then Alperen Şengün is the other question mark on this team, because I'm not touching Jae'Sean Tate. His free throw percent has been terrible, and I don't think he's ever. There really isn't a world where he's going to step into usage. And kind of the same thing with KJ Martin, because a bunch of guys need to get moved in front of him as well. Like if those guys couldn't do good stuff in the last 10 games when a lot of the team was just chilling, it ain't happening. Alperen Şengün was just outside the top 100 over that stretch. With good percentages, but actually with his defensive stats slightly, and I think this was sample size related, kind of artificially depressed. Only 0.7 steals and 0.8 blocks over his last 10 ball games for a guy that had been much more in the 1-1 or even higher range, we've thought, if playing 26, 27 minutes a ball game. Going into next year, unfortunately, he does probably profile as Christian Wood's backup. So we're kind of back where we started with him, which is how long are we willing to wait on someone that has a chance to move into a better role? My answer is not that long. From a Roto's side, he's not someone I would feel comfortable starting at the beginning of the year. Same deal with Kevin Porter Jr. The only player on the Rockets, maybe Christian Wood. Maybe. So maybe the only two players on the Rockets I'd feel comfortable starting day one next year are probably Christian Wood and definitely Jalen Green. Because he's just going to keep getting more to do. He's the prized youngster. That's an easy call. KPJ is someone that I think plays into more stuff as the season goes. Now that, of course, is barring a trade of Eric Gordon before the season starts. The other thing we need to think about here is who comes back. In an Eric Gordon trade, not much. Mostly picks, probably a couple of, players, whatever. A John Wall trade, someone who's not playing right now, if they trade for, almost any combination of players to get you to $40-some-odd million, is going to have someone in there that demands some shots. So that's a trouble spot as well, and another reason to be a bit worried about Kevin Porter Jr. So Jalen Green, he's a Rocket I would think about on opening day in a Roto League next year. And then if you're on the head-to-head side, that opens things up a little bit more. KPJ becomes a possibility on the head-to-head side. I know, I can't believe I'm saying it, but I mean, this is the world of the overreaction. Everybody saw him have a couple big games for Houston 2 years ago. I said, don't draft him. Overreaction. Now he's been awful, and I can say, do consider drafting him. Don't overreact to the fact that he was terrible for most of this year. If they give him the keys in another tank season, that's a positive. So again, just to sort of rehash it. Roto side, Jaylen Green, someone you could consider on draft night. Christian Wood, maybe. It'll depend heavily on where he's going, because I do think that by partway through the year, he's not someone you're going to be able to trust. And he was back in the 80s. You know, his free throw percent was atrocious. Ugh. So he's a maybe. Sengun, probably not on the Roto side. KPJ, probably not on the Roto side. I mean, it does come down again to where you could get these guys. Sengun probably going to get overdrafted. Porter might actually get underdrafted a little bit, so leave him hanging in the balance a little bit. And then both of those guys do get a bump for head-to-head, because I think they'll play, and in head-to-head leagues, you want guys that are in your lineup, at the very least. And then you're talking improvement as the season goes. Sengun's going to get to do more as the season goes. Porter's going to probably get to do more. Just more shots. We need more usage, more volume for those guys, where I do believe Jalen Green will probably have enough right from the outset. I can't wait to see what the guys over at Sports Ethos come up with on the Rockets, because I think it'll be better than whatever you got here on the podcast. But thanks for listening, as always. I am Dan Vespris, and this was off-season show number 28. Yes. Almost to 30. We're getting there. Little by little, mid-May. I remember when the first day of April came, and then the first day of May came, and I thought, how the hell did that happen? First day of June, 2 weeks from now. Oh, gosh, that's my birthday. Oh, no. Oh, heavens, no. All right, well, have a great Wednesday, everybody. We'll break down Heat-Celtics Game 2 tomorrow. Eastern Conference Finals. Enjoy Mavs dubs tonight, and our next team review also on tomorrow's podcast. Until then...
Your plans? Today it's dinner with the parents at your spot.
We gotta come back here.
Now, their spot. Or you're on the edge of your seat at the game.
Come on, just one time.
And it's the one. Or maybe you're catching the next flight to...
Now boarding flight 1850.
Oh, that's you. The choice is yours. And when you're with Amex, it's not if it's going to happen, but when. American Express. Don't live life without it.
Introducing Under Armour's Infinity High Sports Bra. Its ergonomic design is molded to support the natural movement of your body. With cord-out padding, the better breathability eliminates extra bulk without sacrificing support. And quick-dry padding is Under Armour's fastest-drying padding yet. When you're lifting heavy, running fast, and pushing yourself further than ever before, you need a bra that will help you go that extra mile and make you feel your best. Shop the Infinity High Sports Bra now at UA.com.